Clair Obscur Expedition 33 has been the talk of the town ever since it was released earlier this year. I've been in kind of a rut lately with choice paralysis among other things, so I've been having some difficulty finding something to play after Final Fantasy Tactics. I didn't want to risk wasting my time on something I don't like, and at the same time, I wanted something that wouldn't be too obscure for people to be interested in. So I figured I'd go with the safe choice and play Clair Obscur since I just got my physical copy in. There's a lot for me to unpack with this one, so let's roll the intro and get started. Overall, I really enjoyed my time with Clair Obscur. It's solid with very little weaknesses. However, playing this game has made me realize some things about myself and where I am. From reading what other people have said about the game, it didn't impact me as emotionally as other players. And it's not because the story did a bad job of building the connection. It executes the themes of family, grief, life, and death very well. My curiosity was immediately piqued during the introduction, wondering what the deal was with the huge monument and why people were disappearing from the world. The character's motivation was well established, and I understood what they were fighting for. I only became more invested as I learned more about the world and of the people that would shape this long, arduous journey. It's more than just saving their loved ones, but also about how each individual copes with their loss. Not to mention, the world building was done magnificently. The laws of the world make sense. The scenery of the different areas were beautiful and diverse. And all of the various life found throughout were mystical. It's almost like I was playing through a game about a fairy tale. That said, even though I get the story, I still feel numb to it all. As I experience these moments that the characters are going through that are sad, or touching, or uplifting, I couldn't feel the same way. So the whole emotional roller coaster experience was missing for me. And I intentionally used the term missing instead of something like lacking, because it wasn't lacking. All the little bit of field banter to highlight the relationships, the tidbits of information to build empathy towards the villains, and the courage and strength to continue on were not lost on me. It's quite unfortunate because I believe I would have enjoyed it a lot more were I to be in a better space to feel the game's story. One thing I didn't love though was that it felt more like a movie than a game at times with how many cutscenes I had to watch. Of course, I understand what they were trying to go for. The game is beautifully done and the graphics are phenomenal, so naturally you'd want to show it off. It's actually the real reason why it feels like I'm playing through a fairy tale. The world, the scenery, the characters, and the actions helped immerse me in the story and get lost in the game. I had to constantly keep track of the clock to make sure I actually went to bed so I wouldn't be a zombie at work the next day. But if I wanted to watch something, I would have rented a movie. It was an issue for some boss fights as well, because they tried to make attacks too much of a spectacle, causing it to drag when I was retrying fights 10 or 20 times. Fortunately, the focus does shift more heavily towards the gameplay side once all the main story elements are introduced. The combat and progression system is actually the main reason I enjoyed Clair Obscur so much. Turn-based games are always trying to reinvent themselves, but what Sandfall does here isn't new, it's just executed extremely well. QTE-based attacks remind me of The Legend of Dragoon, which is a huge reason why I loved that game. The gameplay is always active and I'm always doing something. On my turn, QTEs boost my damage. On the enemy's turn, timing actions lets me negate damage and counterattack. In theory, a flawless player could beat the hardest boss at level 1 just by dodging everything. This fixes one of the drawbacks of turn-based RPGs, which is waiting during your opponent's turn. Combat is further enhanced by the trade-offs between parry and dodge. While dodges are easier to pull off, parry requires skill but has greater advantages. It enforces the age-old rule of more risk, more reward, a sentiment I can stand behind. Another aspect that makes combat so engaging is the addition of two more defensive actions, jump and gradient parry. It's already difficult enough as it is to build muscle memory for all the different attack patterns, but mix in attacks that can't be dodged or parried by normal means, and it creates an engaging fight. My hands haven't been this sweaty since playing Ys 9 on Lunatic. Visual and audio cues were also done well, so that even if it's the first time seeing a pattern, if I paid close enough attention, I could figure out the timings more effectively. One thing that did take some time getting used to is seeing the attack QTEs. The arrow isn't exactly the most visible or obvious, So in a highly chaotic situation where a lot of visual effects are going off, it can be kind of hard to see. But once I knew the timings, it was no longer an issue. Gun attacks rounded out combat well by adding another layer of interaction. Unlike Persona 5, firing a gun doesn't end the turn, but it does cost AP, so there's this really satisfying rhythm of weaving gun abilities into normal attacks. Because of that, planning out how to use AP becomes its own game. Some enemies even have weak points that only guns can trigger, which adds a whole new dimension to how each encounter is dealt with. It's a small addition on paper, but it ends up making the combat feel way more dynamic and engaging. Honestly, everything wouldn't be half as fun if it wasn't for the vast amount of customizable builds and unique character gimmicks to keep things fresh. In the beginning, things were pretty limited with a low Lumina cap and not enough variety in skills. Everyone pretty much ran the same thing, but once they leveled up and increased the cap as well as unlocking more passives, then the builds start getting really cool. My favorite and most interesting build is the sacrificial buffer I made with an auto death ability. At first, I wondered why I would even want a character to die at the beginning of battle, but I understood once I got the other abilities that trigger on death. The only thing that annoys me in this situation is that some of the abilities don't seem to work, because I have an ability that applies shell to my other characters, and the other characters have an ability that applies powerful when applying shell, but it doesn't seem to trigger. Not sure if this is a bug or if it's intended. And of course, they have glass cannon builds. One of my go-tos with abilities that increase my damage, but also having severe side effects like no healing or increased damage taken. I mean, why not? Especially if I get parries down, then I don't need the health or defense. Though to be fair, this is one of the reasons it took me so long to get through some boss fights, because one mistake just means I die. Since there is a cap, I do have to think about what skills to assign to what character, and how I want that character to function. Of course, if you grind hard enough, you can just have a character with every skill equipped. But you're well past the endgame at that point, and I don't see a reason to continue once I reach that state. I also like the way exploration is handled. Enemies that are defeated are gone until spawns are reset through a map change or rest, giving me the chance to leisurely explore without having to worry about additional encounters. Resources are also limited, which I think is a good idea in theory, though I've never been in a situation where I was left wanting for an extra consumable. Potions and support items get replenished every time a rest occurs, so it requires some balancing of, is it worth it to respawn all the enemies I just defeated to get some items back? My only complaint is that there isn't a minimap and only a world map. Given that the cast is expeditioners, you would think that they could also at least create a map as they traverse. Luckily, the only map where I really got lost was in Siren. Most of the time, it was easy enough to make a mental map and keep track of the paths I hadn't taken, though it still would have been nice to have something to refer to and save some time. Lastly, I can't finish the review without talking about how great the soundtrack is. The main theme and its variations go pretty hard and get stuck in my head. Sometimes I catch myself just randomly whistling the melodies throughout the day. During key moments in the story, the sound effects and music complement the scene very well and bring it to the next level. My only gripe with Clair Obscur comes from the save system. I have no idea why there is only one save file. It makes absolutely no sense to me, and nobody better tell me there are historical saves in the comments. That's not even the point. As a content creator, going back to key points in the game is crucial for getting video footage. With historical saves going back a very limited time, I have very little to work with without having to start the game over. I should be able to make saves at any point in the game and go back to it as needed. This is especially important since the final boss encounter disappears after the credits roll when the game saves, so I can no longer see it again. What game does that, and why does it make sense? Though to be fair, for most people it probably has little effect on their experience. At the end of the day, these complaints don't majorly impact the gameplay and the story Sandfall was trying to tell. Clair Obscur was absolutely a game worth playing, and I'm glad I decided to pick it up. I've spent twice the amount of time I normally do before writing a review because it was entirely worth it. I know this isn't the typical JRPG, but the creators were inspired by Final Fantasy and Persona, so this gets a pass, right? Anyway, that's it from me, so it's time to go play some more video games. Until next time, keep grinding, keep exploring, and I'll see you on the next adventure.